market, are we going to be able to either set up the price on our own or take the price as is, meaning dictated by the market? So let's see which types of market will represent which scenario. So the first type of market is the perfectly competitive market. In this market, there's many firms and many buyers, so many sellers, many buyers. There's no barriers to entry that market, meaning that if you want to start producing there, you can do so pretty easily. And one of the most important characteristics of this market is that in this market we sell identical goods, meaning there's no difference between what I'm selling and what you're selling. So consumers believe that we are selling absolutely the same types of products. For example, if you go to Amazon.com and you go into search for the Principles of Economics textbook by Gregory Mankiw, you will see a bunch of different sellers that sell in that product, and all of them are pretty much offering the same good, the same shipping, the same product, the same book. So that kind of market could be a perfectly competitive market. Or if you think about farmers market, in that market there's many buyers, many sellers, and carrots are just carrots. Pretty much everybody's selling the same type of product, the same identical good. So those are the examples of perfectly competitive markets. Are there many more other examples? Not really. This characteristic of identical good, that's what makes that market pretty unique, pretty different from everything else. So there's actually not that many real life examples of that perfectly competitive market. Why do we need to study it? That's one of the simplest markets to study. So we're going to actually look how the price is being determined in this particular market, and then we're going to be able to make a conclusion about how the price is determined in other types of market. Another extreme is the monopoly. So monopoly is somewhat on the opposite side of the perfectly competitive market. In a monopolistic market, there's only one firm. This one firm has pretty much the power to produce and sell that good. And the reason for that is that there exist barriers to entry. Otherwise, other firms will be entering that market too. So since there's barriers to entry, there's going to be only one firm represented that market. Also, it's important to remember that we talk about some goods, we talk about goods that have no close substitutes. So you can't really go and purchase something similar to this product. Otherwise, this market would not be considered a monopoly. A real life example of monopoly could be something like NFL has the right to televise all the NFL games. Nobody else does. So that's an example of a monopoly. We'll look at the other examples later on when we talk about this market in a greater detail. Monopolistically competitive market is somewhat in between perfectly competitive and monopoly. In monopolistically competitive market, there are some characteristics identical to the perfectly competitive market and some identical to the monopoly. For example, monopolistically competitive market has many firms and no barriers to entry, like perfectly competitive market. But here, instead of identical good, we're talking about differentiated good. So in a way, the sellers try to present their goods as something unique, something that has no substitutes, even though the products are pretty similar. But each manufacturer, each firm says that their product is unique in a certain way. We're going to look at the examples of these markets when we discuss them in more details. And finally, oligopoly. It's also somewhere in between perfectly competitive market and monopoly. There's few firms, there's some barriers to entry, and the sellers are selling somewhat similar goods and services. So it's closer to the monopoly than monopolistically competitive market, but still has some characteristics of a perfectly competitive market. So we'll start the discussion with the perfectly competitive market, perfect competition. So agriculture is an example of this market. Carrots are carrots, oranges are oranges, avocados are avocados. No matter which seller you buying them from, you pretty much receiving the same product. Right? There's some examples of online sellers. If they're offering identical products, there's really no difference between them, and there's plenty of them. That's also an example of a perfect competition. Local gasoline stations is an example. When there's many gas stations located in a close proximity to each other, they're pretty much offering the same good. They're offering the gasoline, right, and maybe some services, some other goods like Coke and candy and things like that. But most likely they're pretty close to each other in what they're selling, and we can call them perfectly competitive markets. We say that in these markets, firms are going to be price takers. So this is that example of a situation where price is going to be determined by the market, by that invisible hand that Adam Smith was talking about. Why is that the case? Well, let's look at the example of the local gasoline station. What will happen if the gasoline station owner decided to increase his prices by 10%? Most likely, all the customers will go to the gasoline station nearby. So he's going to lose most of his customers. What's going to happen if this owner is going to reduce the prices by 10%? Is he going to be able to sell more gasoline? Not really. Once again, remember that in this market there's also many buyers. So no matter what, he has a certain capacity. If he wants to service, he will be able to sell as much gasoline even if he didn't reduce the price below what everybody else is selling. So there's really no need for him to neither increase the price nor decrease the price. So the price is going to be dictated by the market. What represents the market is the demand and supply. So we're going to look at this, how the demand and supply are going to tell us what price is going to be existing in the market. So we say that the price and the quantity of goods that is being sold in a perfectly competitive market is going to be determined by demand and supply. Demand is a function that represents the amount consumers are willing and able to purchase at different prices. Supply is a function that represents the amount of goods and services producers are willing and able to sell at any given prices or at different prices. So demand is representing consumers, supply is representing producers. So demand shows us how the consumers react to change in prices. Supply is showing us how the producers react to change in prices. So let's see how we can represent the demand curve graphically. Demand curve is going to be downward sloping. The reason for that is that consumers don't like increase in prices. As the price increase, there's less consumers who are willing to purchase that good. If the price decreases, so for example, we started with the price P1, and at that price we were demanding quantity Q1, right? That's the point that's on our demand curve. And at that point, consumers demand quantity Q1 at the price P1. If the price drops from P1 to P2, now this good becomes more attractive to the consumers. As a result, they start demanding greater quantity. So quantity demanded increases from Q1 to Q2. So that's the reason for which we say the demand curve is going to be downward sloping. And this downward sloping characteristic is represented in what we call a law of the demand. It says that quantity of the good demanded falls when the price of the good increases, and vice versa. The quantity of the good increases if the price of the good falls. We also have this addition to this definition, other things equal. If nothing else going on in the market, then if the price decreases, there's going to be more of the quantity demanded. So quantity demanded is going to be just a point on our demand curve. And demand overall is going to be represented by this whole line that shows us different quantities demanded at different prices. Why is this important to separate the definition of quantity demanded and demand? It's important because we say that the price does not shift this whole demand curve. Price only changes quantity demanded. So whenever we talk about change in price of the tomatoes dropped. In economics, we say that quantity demanded of tomatoes increased because price decreased. But saying that demand increased because price decreased is going to be wrong. As we see from our curve, once we change the price, nothing happened to our demand. We only moved from one particular point to another point. So we said that quantity demanded changed as price changed. Other things will shift the demand curve. And we're going to look at those other things that shift the demand curve in a second.